Elasticity. So today we'll talk about what is price elasticity of demand and price elasticity of supply. We'll talk about polar cases of elasticity and constant elasticity, elasticity in pricing, and elasticity in areas of the price. Many on-demand internet streaming media providers such as Netflix have introduced tiered pricing for levels of access to services, begging the question, how will these prices affect buyers' choices? And that takes us into elasticity. For starters, elasticity in economics is our responsiveness to a change in price. When I say our, I mean the consumer's responsiveness to a change in price. For example, a person who is on insulin and say a vial of insulin is $25. If that price went to $100, the person on life-saving insulin has no choice but to buy insulin. So in economics, we call that inelastic. That means the response to a change in price is near or close to, well, it's below one, but the response is very, very low because it's a life-saving drug. You need it. On the other hand, if you went to McDonald's and they changed the price of a hamburger from, say, $2 to $10, you've got many choices. Pizza Hut, Chipotle, Burger King, you can go anywhere. Subway. And so in that situation, we call that elastic, highly elastic, meaning a change in price solicits us making other choices as consumers. We have other choices as consumers. Let's get started. Elasticity in an economics concept measures the responsiveness of one variable to changes in another. Price elasticity is the ratio between the percentage change in the quantity demanded, QE, or supply, QS, and the corresponding percentage change in price. Price elasticity demand is the percentage change in quantity demanded of a good or service divided by percentage. Price elasticity of supply is the percentage change in quantity supplied divided by the percentage change. We'll talk about why that's important. Actually use a formula to measure elasticity. So we have three forms. An elastic demand, I talked about that earlier, or elastic supply is one in which the elasticity is greater than one, indicating a high response to changes in price. The faster you've got millions of choices, that's the elastic demand, elastic supply. Inelastic demand, inelastic supply, elasticities that are less than one, indicating low responses to price changes. And then finally, we have what we call unitary elasticities. That indicates proportional responsiveness of either demand or supply. So if you look here below, you can see how we compute it. It's the percentage change in quantity over the percentage change in price. If it's greater than one, it's elastic. If it's equal to one, it's unitary. If it's less than one, it's inelastic. To calculate elasticity along a demand or supply curve, economists use the average percentage change in both quantity and price. You see the percentage change in quantity formula, percentage change in price. Very simple formulas. It's called the midpoint method of elasticity. Here is an example. If you look at my right side, we've computed the percent change in quantity, percent change in price. So the price elasticity of demand is 0.45, meaning if it's less than 1, that's correct. It's inelastic. Responsiveness is small. Here is a calculation using the formulas that I shared with you. You can see the price change in quantity, the price change in price. You divide them with each other for the price elasticity of supply. It equals 3.53. Now we both know, or we all know, that it's greater than 1. So it is elastic. It will be a significant percentage change in the demand for that good or certain supply of that good based on the change. Infinite elasticity or perfect elasticity, either the quantity demanded QE or supply QS changes by an infinite amount in response to any change in price at all. In both cases, the supply and demand are horizontal. Quantity, supply, and demand is extremely responsive to prices, moving from 0 when price is close to P to infinite when price is P. Zero elasticity or perfect inelasticity is a percentage change in price, no matter how large, results in zero change in quantity. The vertical supply curve, or vertical demand curve, shows that there will be 0 percentage change in quantity, A, supply, or B, demand. This is inelastic supply. This is insulin. This is gasoline. The supply and demand, if the price changes, the responsiveness of us as consumers is very, very small. Constant unitary elasticity is either a supply or demand curve. Price change of 1% results in a quantity change of 1%. The demand curve with constant unitary elasticity curve line. Notice how price and quantity changes by an integral amount in each step down the curve. Although we talk about this slide in unitary elasticity, rarely are we going to see price and quantity demanded changing in the same percentage, but it is a concept. Sure. A constant unitary elasticity supply curve is a straight line reaching up from the origin. Between each point, the percentage increase in quantity demand is the same as the percentage increase. Most businesses face a day-to-day struggle to figure out ways to produce at a lower cost. One pathway to their goal of earning profit. However, in some cases, the price of the key input over which the firm has no control may rise or fall. In businesses, pass cost or savings on to what our customers. And that's the challenge. It all depends on what type of business you're in. If labor costs doubled at McDonald's, it's hard for them to absorb that doubling of labor costs. They're going to have to pass that on to consumers in the form of higher prices. Whereas a place like Starbucks, if I have an increase in wages, it's a little bit easier to pass that cost on because we're used to paying you know, $7 8 for something at Starbucks. But at the end of the day, increased costs, maybe high gasoline, those are input costs. That cost is being absorbed by the company and taken out of their profits, passed on to the consumer in the form. Cost saving gains cause supply to shift out to the right. Talked about that from S0 to S1. That is, at any given price, firms will be willing to supply a greater quantity. If demand is inelastic, as in A, the results of this cost-saving technological improvement will be substantially lower prices. If demand is elastic, as in B, the result will be only slightly lower prices. Consumers benefit in either case from a greater quantity at a lower price, but benefit is greater when demand is inelastic, as in higher costs, like tax on cigarette companies, for example, lead supply to shift to the left. This shift is identical in A and B. However, in A, where demand is inelastic, the cost increase can largely be passed along to consumers in the form of higher prices without much of a decline in delivery. And you ask me why? Because it's inelastic. There's no substitute for the tax on cigarettes. There's no substitute for cigarettes. So those who smoke have to absorb that increase in cost by buying cigarettes at a higher cost. In B, demand is elastic, so the shift in supply results primarily in a lower quantity. Consumers do not benefit in either case, but in A, they pay a higher price for the same quantity, while in B, they must buy a lower quantity and presumably need to shift their consumption elsewhere. The tax incidence, manner in which the tax burden is divided between buyers and sellers. And so it matters. It matters if it's inelastic or elastic. You'll notice that items that are highly inelastic, you have state and federal taxes. We pay gasoline tax. We pay cigarette tax. We pay taxes on driver's license. We pay taxes on things that are inelastic. So if demand is more inelastic than supply, consumers bear most of the tax burden. If supply is more inelastic than demand, then sellers bear most of the tax burden. So again, when we purchase things that are inelastic, state, federal, local, it's easy to tax those things because you can definitely pass those on to the consumer because we don't have any choice. We have to buy. We have to buy gas. We have to buy insulin. We have to buy those things. An excise tax introduces a wedge between the price paid by consumers, PC, and the price received by the producer. The more elastic the demand and supply curves, the lower the tax revenue. So when the demand is more elastic than supply, the tax incident on consumers is lower than the tax incident on producers. Vice versa, when the supply is more elastic, the tax incident on consumers is larger than the tax incident on producers. Elasticities are often lower in the short run than in the long run. On the demand side of the market, it can sometimes be difficult to change quantity demand in the short run, but much easier in the long On the supply side, however, on the supply side of markets, producers of goods and services typically find it easier to expand production in the long term of several years rather than in the short run of 2 months. In most markets for goods and services, in the short run, prices bounce up and down more than quantities. In the long run, quantities often move. Again, responsiveness of demand in the oil markets. I'm going to leave this up for a second. You can see the shifts where the demand is more elastic as the B or inelastic as the A. But I think looking at some of the previous slides, I've driven home the point that depending on whether supply or demand is elastic or inelastic determines who bears the increased cost, not to mention defining what these elasticities are. We do have elasticities in areas other than price. So we have income elasticity of demand, which is the percent change in quantity demanded over the percent change in income. For most products, most of the time, income elasticity of demand is positive. That is, a rising income will cause an increase in quantity demand, something that we talked about in the supply and demand chapter. A change in price in one good can shift the quantity demand for another good. So we have another term called cross price elasticity. And these two, I just want you to know the definition. What is cross price elasticity of demand? It's the percentage change in quantity of a good A that is demanded as a result of a percentage change in the price of the good. We also have wage elasticity of labor supply. Again, I just want you to know what these terms are. It's the percentage change in labor supply divided by the percentage change in wages. Wage elasticity of labor demand, percentage change in labor demand divided by the percentage change in wages. We use it also in capital markets. Interest rate elasticity of savings, the percentage change in quantity of savings divided by the percentage change in interest rates. Then we have interest rate elasticity of borrowing, which is the percentage change in the quantity of borrowing divided by the percentage change in interest. Again, for these three slides, I just want you to know what the definition is. The key concept is understanding what elasticity is. How do I determine whether it's inelastic, unitary elastic, or elastic? So, back to Netflix. How did the 60% price increase in 2011 end up for Netflix? Before the price increase, 24.6 million US subscribers subscribed to Netflix. After the price increase, 810, almost a million consumers, canceled their subscription. Fast forward to June 2013, 36 million streaming Netflix subscribers in the US, an average per quarter growth of 1.6 million. This was less than 2 million per quarter increases that had been the previous month before the price change. Why was the estimate of consumers so far up? What missteps did Netflix management make? A misjudgment of elasticity of demand. Due to the increase in the number of substitutes, Amazon Prime, Hulu, Redbox, Voodoo. A misjudgment of consumers' preference and taste Many consumers still prefer a physical DVD over streaming. Of course, it's back in 13 now, 99.9% of our movies are streaming. And that's it on elasticity. Thank you.